Koga-senpai suddenly appeared, declaring his intention to compete for a spot in the high school league. Previously, he had been a promising athlete in his freshman year at the same competition. However, due to an accident during that year's league, he had been relegated to a logistics role for the past 2 years. Seeing Koga issue a challenge, Naruko and others quickly followed him. After a standoff, Naruko realized Koga had no intention of slowing down, recalling Shingo once mentioned Koga's exceptional stamina. They accelerated, even closing in on Teshima. At that point, Koga revealed his true goal was to defeat Teshima, considering him the weakest, despite the other's protagonist-like demeanor. Teshima, aware of the potential plot twist, was ready to lose and yield his captaincy without regrets. A genuine contest began, shocking the juniors with such abrupt developments and the sudden appearance of an unknown senior vying for the captaincy. Curious about the unfolding drama, everyone sped up to watch. With 800 meters to the starting point, the two competed closely, and although Teshima initially had a slight lead, Koga effortlessly overtook him, claiming the race didn't count, and the final outcome would depend on the 1,000-kilometer race's results. Koga agreed to give Teshima another chance, vowing to mentally break him until he quit. Throughout the race, Koga taunted relentlessly, questioning Teshima's limits as a mere mortal. Teshima, known for his verbal retorts, matched Koga's level of trash talk. Shunsuke explained Koga's background to Sakamichi and others, highlighting his past potential and current dissatisfaction due to his injury. Knowing this, the trio understood why Teshima accepted Koga's challenge. The first day ended with Teshima unable to catch Koga and collapsing from exhaustion at the finish line, while Koga remained unfazed, promising to run even faster the next day. The second day, Koga targeted Teshima again, aiming to make him realize his helplessness. Unexpectedly, Teshima smiled, accepting his humanity and his determination to grow stronger during the camp. Next, Teshima fell into memories again. It was 2 years ago during the high school league. At the time, Shingo was injured, so Koga wanted to be the team's ace. But Koga's knee was also injured, a lingering issue from a previous training camp. Everyone advised him to give up and focus on next year, but he ignored them and raced on the final day. He crashed mid-race and worsened his injury. Teshima regretted not persuading Koga then, as it might have changed the outcome. After the memory, Teshima seemed empowered. Koga couldn't shake him off, so Teshima initiated a challenge. No overtaking was allowed after this lap ended. They were to see who could finish the lap first. Teshima had never beaten Koga before, but decided to stake his career on this race. As they entered the final sprint, Koga was still ahead, but Teshima kept up. Then Naruko noticed that Koga hadn't even left his seat or started rocking the bike. With 150 meters left, Koga went all out and gained a lead. But Teshima drew strength from his memories, animated character traits, loud shouting for more speed, and a strong protagonist aura. With these 3 buffs, Teshima overtook Koga just before the finish line, invalidating previous results and winning the captaincy. Perhaps that's the protagonist's privilege. You can beat me 100 times, but I just need to win once. Both were reconciled in the end, with Koga acknowledging Teshima's strength. Thus, Sohoku's team lineup for this year was finally confirmed. On the last day of the camp, everyone noticed Naruko's improved skills. He was determined to reclaim his sprinter title from Akira and wouldn't use his carbon wheels until then. Meanwhile, 2 unexpected guests, Akira and Komari, arrived at the training site. Despite the staff's attempts to stop them, they barged in. Seeing Sohoku training, Akira lost interest instantly, commenting that Sohoku was too weak this year, especially Aoyagi and Teshima, dismissing them as novices. However, Komari was very interested in their physical bodies and wanted to touch their muscles directly. His gestures were indeed very suggestive. In the locker room, Sakamichi encountered the elusive Komari, who expressed a strong desire to touch Shunsuke and asked Sakamichi for Shunsuke's information. Hearing this, Sakamichi was shocked and speechless, wondering if this was the legendary gay behavior. Assuming Kamari was a new student from Sohoku and without any guard, Sakamichi answered all his questions readily. When Kamari asked who was stronger between Shunsuke and Akira, Sakamichi said they did not need to compete. Kamari was dissatisfied with the answer, feeling it insulted cycling sports. He believed there must be a clear winner in any competition and dismissed Sakamichi as merely a substitute, uninteresting to him. Suddenly, Sakamichi slipped and Kamari caught him, and once he touched him, he couldn't stop. Kamari rubbed Sakamichi's abs, as if discovering a new world, finally realizing he was actually touching the legendary Sakamichi. His technique of identifying people by touching their flesh was impressive. Just as he was about to sneak another touch, Koga appeared and immediately recognized that Kamari was not a student from Sohoku. Kamari openly admitted he was just a masseur and there was no need for drama. Koga ruthlessly sent him away, but even that brief contact excited Kamari greatly. Meanwhile, Naruko and Shunsuke had completed their final lap, with Naruko slightly faster, winning over Shunsuke. Watching the capable duo, Sakamichi felt he was falling behind and immediately sought Koga to learn techniques. Perhaps Koga was the real coach, unlike the blonde, chubby man who could only clap and laugh. Unintentionally, Sakamichi and Koga caught up with Issa, who struggled uphill but was fast on flat terrain, suited to be a sprinter. With training, he could reach Tadokoro's level. Koga decided not to share this thought with Issa, but to let him realize it on his own. The 1,000-kilometer race finally ended, and Issa surpassed Teshima, proving he wasn't the weakest in the team. Koga also achieved his goal of completing 1,000 kilometers before graduating high school. After the camp, it was time for the high school league. Everyone arrived at the venue by bus, with Hakone also arriving. Despite Sohoku winning last year, Hakone remained the most popular team. Surprisingly, Toichiro had changed his hairstyle again, a first for a character in a single anime season. Seeing Hakone surrounded by reporters and their own side with no one, Naruko was very depression. It seems everyone thinks Sohoku won last year by luck. This year, they need to prove themselves. This year, Sohoku received single-digit bib numbers, with Sakamichi getting the number 1, symbolizing the ace. Even he couldn't believe he got number 1. However, everyone felt that last year Sakamichi won first place carrying the team's will, so he deserves this number. Naruko suddenly mentioned he had personal matters to handle and temporarily left the team. He went to Kyoto Fushimi High School's rest area, looking for Akira. Akira had also changed his hairstyle, more extreme than Toichiro, changing his hairstyle 4 times in a year. Naruko challenged Akira to a race to settle their personal grudge in this high school competition. Akira agreed to Naruko's request, stating this was Naruko's only chance. If he loses, he won't get another chance to challenge him. Issa gets nervous and ends up with a stomach upset. Unfortunately, the toilets were full. Just as he was about to burst, someone finally finished and opened the door, resulting in a classic restroom encounter. This fellow restroom user was Masakio from Hakone. They immediately confronted each other, but Issa said he had to go first. After finishing, they resumed their unfinished confrontation, though it was more verbal than physical. Masakio called Sakamichi trash, lucky to win the championship. Issa thought about it, seeing some logic in it. But as Sakamichi's teammate, he defended him, claiming he joined Sohoku because of Sakamichi, who he believed was unbeatable. Masakio continued his aggressive attack, suggesting Issa was just deluding himself. If Sakamichi wasn't as good as Issa thought, then joining Sohoku was a big mistake. In this clash between a critic and a fan, the critic won. Issa fell into self-doubt. Masakio, satisfied with his victory in the argument, promised to show Issa how strong the reigning champions Hakone really were. A dejected Issa returned to the rest area. Watching the clumsy Sakamichi, he doubted again if Sakamichi was really as strong as the legends say. The race was about to start, and Kyoto Fushimi High School made a last-minute change in their lineup. Komari, a masseur, was put in, and Mob-kun was unexpectedly benched. This was all part of Akira's plan. He listed the less skilled mob-kun in the lineup to make others think this year's Kyoto Fushimi High School was weak. Before the race started, they used the excuse of mob-kun being injured to forcibly swap him with Komari, whom they favored. Although it was unclear if this would upset the competitors, it certainly disgusted his own teammates. Komari, who had never demonstrated his abilities publicly, was unknown even to his own team at Kyoto Fushimi High School. At that time, Komari was warming up on the cycling track with another purpose in mind, to sneakily touch Shunsuke. While Shunsuke was warming up with Terafumi, Komari, with blue hair, suddenly reached into Shunsuke's pants. Surprised by Shunsuke's firm muscles, Komari couldn't help but exclaim, "Great muscles." He realized Shunsuke might be injured as he could detect the injury just by touching. "You're the man who could put X-ray machines out of work. A few more touches and you might even cure cancer." Shunsuke didn't argue, suggesting Komari was right. Unfortunately for Sohoku, injuries were starting to appear by the high school competition. Teshima's middle school friend, Azumado, who had switched from cycling to volleyball in high school, came to cheer for him. Admiring Teshima for continuing cycling and participating in the nationals, they were chatting when Takuto also came to greet them. Although Azumado knew Takuto didn't remember him. Azumado suggested a photo together after a long time, but Takuto felt he was now Teshima's enemy and declined to avoid misunderstandings among teammates. He reminded Teshima that this year's Hakone team was stronger than last year, highlighting a new first-year member who was Hayato's younger brother, Yuto, a climber unlike Hayato. Despite it being Sakamichi's second time at the high school competition, he was extremely nervous, especially since he had won the championship last year, thus carrying a heavier burden and adding invisible pressure on him. When it was time to line up, Sohoku was at the very front, attracting everyone's attention, which overwhelmed Sakamichi, causing his hands to tremble. At such a critical moment, what was needed was talk therapy. Aoyagi, serving as the therapist, told Sakamichi that he had become stronger than last year and had inherited the spirit of Sohoku. He needed to pass this spirit on to Issa and ensure the legacy continued. The talk therapy had an immediate effect, visibly boosting Sakamichi's spirit. The second year of the high school competition finally began, starting with the parade just like last year. It was Teshima and Aoyagi's first time participating in the high school competition, and naturally, they were filled with mixed emotions. It had taken them 3 years to move from spectators to participants. During the parade, Sakamichi deliberately slowed down to greet Manami, an old acquaintance. Sakamichi's face turned red as they reminisced about a race last winter. Before graduating, Todo wanted to find someone to inherit his title as the Mountain God, so he called them to compete. However, the race was postponed due to heavy snow on the mountain, so they agreed to settle it at the high school competition to decide the new Mountain God. As the parade segment ended, the sprinters section began. Hakone sent out Masakio, who charged forward like an attack on Titan. Sohoku responded with Issa and Aoyagi. However, Issa still thought he was an all-rounder, blaming Teshima's tactics, until Aoyagi literally dragged him away, pointing out his misunderstanding of his role. They hoped the race would help Issa evolve. On the sprint path, Issa continued to talk, not believing he was considered a sprinter when he felt he should be the ace. Aoyagi didn't bother with small talk and began analyzing the situation, noting that Sohoku was already behind the lead group. They calculated that with 43 riders ahead and 13 behind, they needed to overtake 30 riders. The duo set their goal and began to chase vigorously, taking turns leading. As they advanced, their slender figures attracted mocking from other competitors. Aoyagi couldn't stand being called skinny and began to inhale deeply, swelling his muscles to their maximum, which left the others stunned. After explaining his muscle expansion technique, Aoyagi, with Issa, rapidly advanced towards the front group. Seeing the fierce competition among the sprinters ahead, Naruko grew restless. Now an all-rounder, he knew he couldn't act recklessly. Suddenly, Toichiro appeared beside him, also struggling to restrain himself. If not for their teammates stopping them in time, they might have dashed forward. Toichiro could only flex his muscles in frustration, turning the situation into a war of words. He started boasting about his side's sprinters, calling Masakyo a hentai among hentais, indicating even Hakone knew their quirks. Seeing Sohoku's duo catching up, Masakyo fully unleashed his power, his fighting spirit visibly igniting, intimidating nearby riders. Aoyagi felt he was no match for Masakyo. However, Isa's fighting spirit was high. Having previously clashed with Masakyo, he was determined not to lose on the track. He declared he would no longer hide his strength. Until now, he had never used the lower handlebars. Today, he decided to unleash his full potential. Isa, gripping the lower handlebars, revealed his unique sprinting stance. His body surged with green fighting spirit. Isa's full acceleration surprised Aoyagi, moving faster than ever before. After intense training and secret tips from Aoyagi, which Isa believed were from the cycling god, his confidence soared. Together, they started catching up to Masakyo. Masakyo, however, had his own way of evolving, distinct from Toichiro. Whenever he tore his clothes, it signaled his full effort, often becoming aggressive towards teammates and even hitting seniors, leading to his isolation by most of his team. Yet, Toichiro saw potential in him, encouraging him to be true to himself regardless of others' opinions. With the protagonist's aura, Isa caught up to Masakyo. He then passed the final kilometer sprint task to Aoyagi. Transforming once again into a meatball tank, Aoyagi took the lead. At this moment, Masakyo was just gearing up to go all out. He stuck out his tongue, tore open his shirt, and started chasing Aoyagi, as if to devour him, tongue flailing behind. As Masakyo was about to overtake him, Aoyagi had to use his special technique. Indeed, he had a secret move. Concentrating gas in his abdomen into his thighs, his leg muscles swelled with power. This move doubled his sprint speed, but at the cost of more energy, meant for the last 150 meters. But the situation didn't allow for such ease now. Recalling memories gave him unlimited strength. Unaware, Masakyo had almost caught up, thrilled by the chase. Aoyagi's body began to alarm, yet Masakyo showed no signs of slowing. Just as he was about to overtake, Isa surged from the other side, proposing to lead Aoyagi a bit longer. However, Aoyagi noted they were near the finish and should just sprint. Isa, being an all-rounder, declined the sprint champion title. This made Aoyagi act, riding ahead to shield Isa from the wind. Pulling out a long-held note from his pocket, he revealed his identity to Isa. Indeed, he was the superhero behind him all along, known as Bike Man. Aoyagi accurately predicted the plot from the start, proving he is indeed the cycling god. Isa finally believed Aoyagi's words when his fighting spirit turned golden, signaling a transformation akin to a Super Saiyan. The overwhelming spiritual pressure caused Masakyo to break into a cold sweat as the final sprint began. Masakyo accelerated first, but with Aoyagi's help, Isa quickly overtook him, even finding time to wipe his sweat, controlling his speed at will, toying with Masakyo. Despite this, Masakyo was no ordinary competitor. He followed Isa closely, waiting for an opportunity to overtake. The two were neck and neck in the final stretch, with Masakyo gaining a slight lead momentarily. As they approached the finish line, Isa unexpectedly used the memory technique, which gave him strength from thoughts of Senior Aoyagi. They crossed the finish line almost simultaneously, each thinking they had won. However, according to scientific measurements, Masakyo won by a slim margin, earning Hakone the title of Sprint King on the first day. Because Hakone's sprinter defeated Sohoku, Sohoku relinquished the lead, and Hakone took over. Unexpectedly, Hakone began to accelerate, aiming to widen the gap before entering the mountains. Sohoku quickly caught up, with Toichiro explaining he avoided the Sprint King contest to save energy for this moment, aiming to secure a significant lead for his team. Sohoku's weakest, Teshima, wasn't a match for Toichiro, so Naruko took over this segment. The scene shifts to Isa, who became reclusive after losing the race. Suddenly, he hears encouragement from his teammates, Dan, Terafumi, and Koga, which revitalizes him. Isa vows to win if he faces his opponent again. Meanwhile, although Toichiro continued to accelerate, Naruko's leadership quickly brought Sohoku back into contention. Toichiro started mocking Sohoku for their inability to outpace just one of their sprinters, but this tactic was ineffective against Teshima, who is adept at verbal sparring. Teshima highlighted that Sohoku is a team that supports each other and that failure leads to growth. Kuroda, observing the still determined Sohoku, couldn't understand why their morale was unaffected by the sprint loss. Toichiro explained it was all thanks to Sakamichi's influence on the team's spirit. However, Kuroda and even Masakio still underestimated Sakamichi, dismissing his previous victories as mere luck. As the sprinters and the main group reunited, Teshima gave Sakamichi a task: to maintain his position in the middle of the team. He realized Hakone was deliberately slowing down. By then, the main group had caught up. Soon, both teams were lost in the flow of traffic. This was Hakone's aim: to scatter the Sohoku team members, especially Sakamichi. Now, Sakamichi was separated by other riders. As the lead rider, he would be targeted by all competitors. Completely surrounded, Sakamichi couldn't see a way back to his team. Will Toichiro's strategy to divide Sohoku work smoothly? Sakamichi was outmaneuvered by Hakone and overwhelmed by the pursuing main group, cutting him off from his teammates. The upcoming Irohaba mountain route was the challenge of the day. Without Sakamichi, Sohoku would struggle as teams sent their best climbers for a head-to-head battle. Knowing he had to catch up, Sakamichi prepared his special move despite 3 minor characters trying to block him. The new version of the Princess song played, quickly leaving them behind. Despite their efforts, they couldn't match Sakamichi head-on. Sakamichi was 5 minutes behind the lead group and started his favored chase. He continuously passed other riders, though not all tried to stop him, many let him pass willingly. However, like last year, as he approached the large group ahead, he encountered Akira and Kyoto Fushimi High School controlling the group's pace. Sakamichi wanted to speed past, but Mizuta immediately blocked him. Initially, it seemed Akira wanted to stop Sakamichi, but he surprisingly invited him to join, suggesting a collaboration to save energy since their goal was the same. Skeptical of Akira's intentions, Sakamichi chose to continue alone. Akira then sent Yamaguchi to block Sakamichi, but as a sprinter, Yamaguchi struggled to keep up and was quickly dropped. Sakamichi successfully broke free and caught up with Sohoku. He didn't stop there. He aimed for the mountain prize. However, Teshima had already started competing for it 4.5 minutes earlier. Staying with the team to conserve energy seemed wise, but Shunsuke trusted Sakamichi. With support from his teammates, Sakamichi began his pursuit of the mountain prize. Meanwhile, Teshima was fiercely competing with Manami but was clearly the underdog. Manami easily kept pace with Teshima without exerting much effort. He didn't pass Teshima because he was waiting for the wind. Just as Manami was about to surge forward, Teshima prepared to accelerate again to maintain the lead, but it was in vain. He was quickly overtaken as he was no match for Manami. Manami thought he had decisively beaten Teshima, but surprisingly, Teshima clenched his teeth and caught up again. However, Teshima's body was already severely strained, while Manami hadn't even used his full strength. Teshima nearly collapsed. He was lucky to regain consciousness just before a potential crash. He steadied himself on one foot and regained his posture. Manami was surprised but pleased to see Teshima catch up, making the race interesting. He asked Teshima how he could persist, to which Teshima replied that he simply loved cycling. Sakamichi quickly disappeared from view, and Toichiro didn't consider him a threat, thinking he was too far behind. Manami was set to win the mountain prize with only 3 kilometers left to the finish. Manami now found Teshima intriguing as it was rare for someone to be so resilient. Most would give up after being overtaken a couple of times. Manami decided to go all out and shifted up a gear. Teshima had stepped up to challenge Manami to make Hakone lower their guard, thinking he posed no threat, which he proved true. Now, with only 1,500 meters to the finish, Manami could still chat casually with Teshima. Despite Teshima's relentless pursuit, he couldn't catch up, but he earned the support of the roadside spectators, feeling like a star for the first time. Just then, Manami's chain broke, a critical mishap. Teshima seized the opportunity to overtake. Manami had no choice but to stop and fix it, costing him less than 20 seconds, but the gap was significant. However, Teshima unexpectedly waited for Manami, showing great sportsmanship. They restarted together, and this time, with the protagonist's aura, Teshima matched Manami. However, reality was harsh, and Teshima still fell short when Manami went all out, losing by a slim margin. Manami was thrilled with his victory, proving himself in the high school league. Teshima, though defeated honorably, was exhausted and once again acknowledged the gap in talent between him and Manami. Manami suddenly came up to Teshima. He first thanked Teshima for stopping and waiting for him, then heaped praise on him, declaring Teshima the real strong one in his eyes. With only 300 meters to the finish, nobody else would choose to stop and wait for an opponent, but Teshima did. By then, it was known that Teshima had secured second place by a narrow margin, and everyone was thrilled. Teshima had performed exceptionally well. Hakone had taken the lead again, which delighted Toichiro, but Sohoku was even more excited. They had never expected Teshima to keep up so closely, and their morale was even higher. However, Teshima at the front then experienced physical problems. Exhausted from the effort, he had no energy left to continue riding. Fortunately, Sakamichi caught up in time to prevent him from falling. After washing his hair, Teshima was able to get back on the road, joking that his hair was the real deal. The leading group was about to reach the top of the mountain and start the descent. Meanwhile, Sohoku's supply vehicle was stuck halfway due to a traffic accident ahead. If the supply vehicle couldn't reach the supply point, Sohoku's riders might have to race without water. Luckily, they had brought a spare vehicle, and Koga and Terafumi could ride to deliver supplies. After passing the speed checkpoint at the mountaintop, Hakone started to push the pace. Kuroda fell into a reminiscence. He used to be a climber, but switched to being a lead assistant at Toichiro's suggestion. During the flashback, he recalled initially disrespecting Toichiro, who was slow to learn and talked too much. However, once Toichiro became a key team member, Kuroda began to respect him. Accepting the advice, he decided to be whatever the team needed. After the memory, Kuroda and Takuto surged ahead. Sohoku was also ready, with Naruko as the ace assistant. It was all around Naruko's debut race. He had been conserving energy precisely for this moment to lead Shunsuke in a sprint. Naruko accelerated, hugging the guardrails on turns, showing his strength had greatly improved. Quickly they caught up with Hakone. Seeing Sohoku's approach, Kuroda was not panicked at all but started chatting. He introduced himself, calling his nickname Kuroneko, Black Cat, Hakone's fastest ace courier. I don't know what Black Cat and courier have to do with each other. Could it be there's a Black Cat courier service in Japan? After the conversation, Kuroda began to speed up. He planned to completely shake off Sohoku at the upcoming curve. Indeed, as he expected, this curve gave him a nearly 2-second lead. Kuroda's thigh muscles are different from others. They are very elastic and rebound like springs when cycling. I don't understand the mechanics. That's up to the author. Kuroda reached the front group first, followed closely by Naruko and Shunsuke. Sakamichi had to stay back to push Teshima to the finish, leaving the race to Naruko and Shunsuke. Naruko's climbing ability is also very strong now. He quickly caught up with Kuroda. Then Kuroda challenged their roles, asking who the real ace was between Naruko and Shunsuke. Without thinking, both believed they were the ace. Naruko admitted he liked to stand out and planned to have Shunsuke assist him later. Kuroda felt clever, causing a rift between them with just one sentence. Unexpectedly, the Sohoku duo started racing each other to see who could reach the finish first. Kuroda was suddenly left behind by them. He wouldn't allow Sohoku's youngsters to ignore him and chased after them. Then he and Takuto split up to overtake from both sides. This was their signature move, perfected over a year of teamwork. They were much better coordinated than the Sohoku pair. Despite appearing to have a poor relationship, Naruko and Shunsuke recognized each other's strengths. Naruko didn't speed up because he knew Shunsuke had been leading for a long time and wanted to give him a rest, Shunsuke also acknowledged that Naruko had become much stronger. Now, the two stubborn guys finally cleared the air and were ready to work together against Hakone. Koga and Terufumi delivered water just in time for Shunsuke and Naruko. With less than 10 kilometers to the finish, it was the final decisive moment. However, Koga and the others were surprised to see Kyoto Fushimi High School's logistics staff standing by the roadside, indicating that their team was also nearing. But the main forces of Hakone and Sohoku hadn't arrived yet. Could it mean Kyoto Fushimi High School had overtaken them? Seeing Akira followed by Kamari, Koga suddenly remembered something from a training session where he claimed to be a masseur. That was just a lie. Koga saw no desire to win in Kamari's eyes. His real purpose was to catch up to the front group to feel the muscles, literally the world's greatest pervert. Akira and Kamari specifically targeted Sohoku and Hakone, planning to overtake them at the watering station when their guard was down. Although Shunsuke reacted in time, the remaining were too weak to catch up. With 4,000 meters to the finish, Shunsuke took the lead. If they couldn't decide who was the ace, then both would be. This bizarre tactic made Kuroda laugh, as if the two were inexperienced cyclists. Just as they were fiercely competing, an eerie sound suddenly came from behind. Everyone looked back to see two freaks rapidly approaching. Now, Akira appeared as a giant in everyone's eyes, a manifestation of his special ability to materialize his oppressive aura into a giant figure. The story is moving in a supernatural direction. That's all for today's episode. See you next time.